And action, and welcome everybody. This is PnP Weekly episode 243. We are recording on 27th of March. As an exception, Eastern holidays are coming in Europe, which is being celebrated, I think, pretty consistently across the Europe. So Friday is off, Monday is off, so we're recording this a bit earlier. And in the PnP Weekly, let's talk about the latest Microsoft 365 and related technologies. And typically we also, well, always we have an interview, but then we have an articles, or maybe not. This time, no articles, because again, we just recorded the latest articles. When was it? On Monday, 2 days ago.
2 days ago, yes.
So we'll do that again week after well, 1 week later. So that's how it works in the PnP Weekly, which is happening every single week. Except on the summertime. So anyway, today's visitor is
Totally obvious, totally clear.
Who do we have on the visitor side, Waldek?
Today our guest is Tony Redmond, who is longtime MVP, despite like people assuming that he's not from the US today, like these days. He used to live there in the past, but he's not in the US. He's a longtime MVP. He's well-known author, speaker,
many other things.
Expert Microsoft Tech,
yes.
right? So
yes,
we had a great chat with him about, you know, the history, like because he's been around for so long, so he's seen Microsoft evolve all the way from SharePoint 2001, maybe even before, all the way to where we are now. So it was really great to chat with him about his experience, perspective, but also where we are now and what challenges he sees with the companies who use the Microsoft Tech now. So I would say, without further ado, let's jump into the interview.
Let's jump on the interview. Tony, you're missing now. Movements.
Movement.
Sorry, never mind. Let's actually focus. So, welcome, Tony, on the PnP Weekly to episode 243. I guess that's the episode. Doesn't really matter. It's all about the visitors which we have on the show and talking about their career and the community and their role nowadays in the community. But let's start with basics, Tony. Who are you, and what are you doing for a living?
I do as little as possible for a living. I find that is a very good way of operating. I mean, for years I was a corporate executive. I ended up as a vice president and chief technology officer in HP. I was after executive positions in Digital Equipment Corporation and Compaq. So I did all that, lived the corporate dream, and got very fed up of corporate con calls. You know, there's one thing that I hate above all in this world is a con call that can't make a decision. Right.
Completely agree on that. Yes.
Okay. So at the age of 50 or thereabouts, I decided there is more to life than being on con calls for 8 hours a day, and so I left and became an independent. And I'm still independent. I'm still very independent, and I love writing. And I guess I keep on writing, and I keep on writing, and I keep on writing. I do other stuff as well. I mean, I work with companies at the kind of a strategic level to figure out what's going on in the market.
Yeah, and is that specifically for Microsoft 365 or all up technology industry?
People come to me about Microsoft 365, but over the years I've worked on lots of different technologies. Worked for a time with HP Labs, so very familiar with the R&D kind of aspect as well. I've been a board chairman as well for
board or board?
Board, B-O-A-R-D, like. Oh, well, I was bored. Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Big time. No, actually it wasn't. It was great fun because in a small company, it's very different to a large company. And an ISV inside the Microsoft 365 ecosystem has a very difficult role because, in the on-premises environments, whether it was for SharePoint server or Exchange server, there were lots of gaps to be filled, right? And there were lots of ways of filling gaps, and ISV had a happy old time. Inside the Microsoft 365 environment, it's much more complicated. and there are fewer gaps to fill because, I mean, you can't get access to servers, for instance, so you can't install your software and servers. So for ISVs, I think it's a very, very challenging situation. And so working with a small ISV to develop product, get product, and sell, every quarter is your challenge, was very interesting, very fulfilling, and great people.
How do you see, actually, that is a good discussion point and a kind of a donkey bridge segue to the donkey bridge in Netherlands and Finnish means segue. So it's a weird translation thing, culture. Yeah, so exactly my reaction as well. Now, welcome to the PnP Weekly Show. We talk about the differences on the languages and read. Anyway, so how do you see the transition? You talked about how the world has changed to be more difficult from on-premises to the cloud, and obviously it changed a lot. I remember ISVs where you installed ISV stuff on-prem, and they did a stored procedures and whatever in SQL level to do replication of data, which some ISVs were doing. Obviously, you don't have that level of access. Is there a room for ISVs in this cloud world anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. Microsoft 365 is a very strange environment in many ways because I think the admin interfaces in particular are built for small to medium tenants. They're not built to scale up. I mean, yeah. Who wants to do anything through the Microsoft 365 Admin Center if it's more than just updating 1 or 2 accounts or something like that, or a one-off operation? So automation is terrifically important. And I got to believe, my major criticism for Microsoft over the years, and it's still a criticism today, is that Microsoft engineers are so happy to develop whiz-bang wallop features, and they forget about all the block and tackle kind of stuff, the daily grunge and grind of tenant administration. They just forget about it because it's not interesting. So I think ISVs have got a huge role to play here to automate common day-to-day operations, to make things smarter for the average tenant administrator. And tenant administrators a couple of years ago, I remember back to the Exchange 2014 conference, people were saying, so my last act before I'm marched out of the door by the corporate heavies is to hand over the keys of the last Exchange server, turn it off, everybody's in the cloud, and I'll never have any work to do. Well, the sad fact is, guys, that the administrators have more work to do today than they ever had to do in the past. And the only way to get on top of that work is to automate, and automate. So I think ISVs have got a role there. But also, I think administrators have got an even bigger role than they used to have in the past. But they have to get into the whole automation side.
Yeah, and with automation, we explicitly, if we go to that discussion for a while, we talk about PowerShell and of course scripts or automated code running in cloud against the tenant. And with PowerShell, that's one of the easiest ways to do that, right? So,
yeah, I mean the vision that Jeffrey Snover, who I actually worked with at Digital. He and I were both at Digital. I actually worked with his wife more closely, but that's a secret that we don't talk about very much. Yeah. Anyway, Jeffrey's. Yeah, we don't want to talk about it. Anyway, Jeffrey's vision of power for Monad for PowerShell was tremendous. I mean, the first time I heard about it, I thought, this is the thing that Windows Server has been looking for years and years and years. I mean, let's face it, folks. Trying to automate stuff with WMI, for example. Do you ever remember that? Windows Management Instrumentation. Oh my God, heartbreak. So the clarity, the simplicity, the power of PowerShell became evident so quickly, especially after the Exchange guys got onto the bandwagon and shipped the first server implementation of PowerShell with Exchange 2007. So that's 18 years ago. And 18 years later, I'm still writing the same scripts, but they're nicer scripts. I've got to say, no, seriously. I'll tell you a story. The first PowerShell script that people write, at least in the Exchange world, is inevitably the one that reports all the mailboxes and tell you how big the mailboxes are. The last script I published a couple of days ago was a new take on this classic script. Now it's done much nicer and produces nice HTML output, but it's the same basic script. Hey, 18 years later, what can I say? I'm still doing the same tricks.
But it's the same technology coming back on Stephen Snowden. So.
I think it there's no doubt it has evolved. And the greatest thing that has recently come out, I wasn't a fan of this originally, but I think it's proving its worth now, is the Microsoft Graph PowerShell SDK, because that just liberates people into the automation possibilities that are available with all of the Graph APIs through a PowerShell interface. And that, coupled with Azure automation and the possibility of running PowerShell scripts in runbooks on Azure automation, it just opens up so many things. So we're living in a world where I think there's huge possibilities for people, but they have to get the fundamentals right. They have to learn how to use PowerShell. I'm not saying they have to be a professional PowerShell developer, and I do differentiate between a professional PowerShell developer who cares very much about how their code looks and how error handling works, and somebody like me who's a bit of a hacker. In fact, I am a hacker par excellence, because I don't really care about all that professional stuff. I just want to get stuff done. Yeah. PowerShell is just a wonderful language for getting stuff done. I was going to say getting shit done, but then I said you guys would have to censor that, and I can't say that. That's what PowerShell does. It gets shit done.
Yes. So one thing I wonder about, right? Because at some point you mentioned the vision, right, that Jeffrey had originally when he thought of that new scripting environment. Yeah. Where would you say, where are we today? Have we are we true to the vision that he says that he had all these years back, or are we are there still gaps?
I think Jeff Snover wanted to help people automate stuff, and there's no doubt that PowerShell continues to help people automate stuff. Yeah. The biggest insight I think Jeffrey Snover had at the time, it was that Microsoft cannot do everything. It is not humanly possible for Microsoft to answer every customer requirement in the administration space. Yeah. It is possible with PowerShell and with Power Automate and with Azure Automation and the range of tools that we have today.
As long as we have the APIs for it, right? Which again,
as long as you have APIs, yeah. As long as the APIs are coming, and to be fair, the APIs are now coming reasonably well. I found a couple of gaps today and had the opportunity to complain to people. I love complaining to Microsoft development groups, but that's a personal problem I have. Anyway, yes, you're right. As long as the Graph APIs are there, you're away. But the point is that without PowerShell, those Graph APIs would probably be inaccessible for people. Sure. Because your average tenant administrator is not going to sit down and figure out how to write C#. Yeah. I mean, they're not going to do it. They've got other stuff to do. So all that time necessary to learn a programming language and implement it and whatever, for an administrator, the average administrator, that could be wasted time when they could be actually doing stuff. And they do stuff with the PowerShell.
We do actually see similar kind of trends, and it a bit depends on the company and everything else, but that there are companies and partners who are building their Azure functions using PowerShell, for example, PnP PowerShell, depending if specifically on the SharePoint operations, because again, then you can really easily and rapidly modify and adjust that Azure function just by having a new version of the script. No compilation, no deployment, it's just super simple directly from the UX if needed.
Yep, and that illustrates the power of Jeffrey's vision.
Yeah,
100%. Because he laid that down. He tied it to .NET. He made sure that PowerShell could use the whole .NET framework. That's just wonderful. Just wonderful.
And if you go back in time, and I think everybody in the call have read Jeffrey's historical thing. He got demoted for creating PowerShell originally.
He took a head back.
He didn't do well. He didn't do badly in the end, sitting to the right hand of Satya.
That is true. Yes.
Yeah.
And now,
Eventually,
now
yes, but like that is like far out, right? Like there wasn't the vision at the time, or there wasn't the reaction at the time.
Well, it was a different Microsoft.
Yeah,
it was a different
also,
Microsoft where Windows reigned supreme. Let's face it.
Yes, because that was the licensing, incoming licensing stream, and money was the Windows.
Yeah, but also like doing everything in the UI. He was the only person back then thinking like, no, we have to have a way to automate, and clicking is not automation.
No. Oh, well, it could be automation.
Well, yeah.
I mean, if you look at, sorry, okay, I could say some nasty things about Microsoft training, but I'm not going to do that because that would be bad. Moving quickly along, could somebody give me something else to talk about, for God's sake, before I say some really rude things?
Now, you said that Microsoft was different at the time.
Yes.
Have you seen the company to evolve? And obviously, I've been 17 years in Microsoft, but when you're inside, you see the change, but it's different. You've been outside working with Microsoft ecosystem for most of your career, probably. Since 1920s.
No, I'll tell you exactly when. So in Digital Equipment Corporation, I was working on an email server that was going to run an NT. And it was great. Absolutely fantastic email service. Best email server, much better than Exchange. But anyway, on August the 2nd, 1995, Bill Gates and Bob Palmer was the CEO of Digital, came together and they signed up the Alliance for Enterprise Computing. The day after, the mail server I was working on was cancelled because Digital said, no, we're going to support Exchange.
Yep.
And I said, oh, wow, that piece of whatever. And of course, look at me here, nearly 30 years later.
Yeah.
I mean, so like there was a really great start, so to say, of the relationship between you and Microsoft. Like it started on a high note, not really.
Well, I mean, as it turned out, at HP, I ended up as the executive sponsor for Microsoft. So I was the one who got calls when things like the SAN that supported Exchange clusters, Exchange 2003 clusters failed. So, I got called up and said, hey, we got a problem here. What are you going to do about it? It's like, me, I don't know.
We'll figure it out.
That's a typical executive reaction, by the way. No, I can't do anything. Yeah, so I've seen it. I've seen Microsoft from many different directions. I sat in a couple of Bill Gates product reviews in the early days of Exchange. That was fun. At the launch of SharePoint, I think it was 2007. Yeah, SharePoint 2007. I had lunch with Bill Gates in San Francisco at the launch because I was sent along as the official HP representative. And he asked me what I thought of SharePoint, and I said at the time, it'd be okay if Microsoft hadn't overcomplicated it and added some administrative tools. So that was the end of that conversation. Moving quickly along, it just proved my ability to make. No. It just proved my ability to make friends and influence people in 32 seconds or less. So.
Well, I mean, eventually, all these years down the road, like we've got PowerShell for SPO. So
it was we did
seed, right?
We did have a PowerShell in SharePoint 2010, so we didn't have a PowerShell in 2007.
Correct. It was STS ADM, yes.
Yeah, and at that stage, to be fair, SharePoint had gone away from its roots. SharePoint Portal Server 2001, which I remember very fondly because it helped me save a huge amount of money after the Compaq HP merger. Helped me get rid of some ginormous Unix cluster that was being used for knowledge management at the time and replace it with 6 Windows servers running Portal Server 2001. SharePoint had gone away. I think it had lost its way to a certain extent. It had become terribly complicated and terribly difficult to manage. And things actually went worse even later, even after SharePoint got PowerShell, because do you remember the abomination of site mailboxes? This thing that was going to link it. Let's link 2 Microsoft products together in 55 easy steps that have to be that have to be performed precisely as documented, no deviation allowed, and you have to wait for everything to complete. And if it was a Sunday and the wind was from the west, SharePoint and Exchange might talk together. My God.
I remember those Sundays when I was configuring stuff for customers, and then it's like not working, and it's like wife is calling and trying to explain that I can't come. I need to get this up and running. So
yeah,
I have to say one thing. So we're recording this on 27th of March, 2024. March 28th, so tomorrow, 2001, was the launch date of SharePoint. So we are now 23 years. So if I'm calculating this correctly, math is so hard. So
I know, yeah. Well, isn't that the classic Microsoft excuse for not doing something? It's a hard computer science problem.
Ouch.
Sorry.
No, all good. All
you
good.
should never ask a question or pose something without knowing what's coming back. Politicians will tell you that all the time.
Yeah, no.
Anyway,
I think we're all, but both of us are ex-consultants, so we've seen stuff and opinions. So
this is true. Anyway, where are we going with this?
I don't know, but coming back on something related on Microsoft Learning and getting things and something which we talked about with Waldek at some point, which I think you would agree that it would be really awesome if some of the Redmond or nowadays the global workforce, which is in engineering, would have like 6 months or 3 months even excursions to the consulting and customer cases, so they would understand how the customers are actually working. We're making better, we're making improvements, and we're trying to get people more connected, but there's still this disconnect on who's creating stuff and the real world. So
yeah, I think that's true, and I think Microsoft made a fundamental error with Ignite by making it into a marketing fest and stopping engineers being able to go and talk to customers at an event and man those booths where customers would come up with the most strange questions and problems or whatever. But I think those events and that unique interaction that occurred at those events, because engineers had the opportunity to go and see what was in the market. They could tour the technology exhibition, see what's on. They could listen to third-party speakers talking about their products and get a unique view about how people felt about the software they're developing. And then, as I said, have that face-to-face interaction with real-life customers, the people who actually pay their salaries. Because Microsoft decided that Ignite was going to be an event where, firstly, external speakers don't speak, but secondly, that the Microsoft engineers didn't get a chance to attend. I mean, come on, guys, who'd go to Ignite now? To me, it's a huge missed opportunity, and I regret that very, very, very much.
I think we're trying to get back on the a bit more normal. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
In Chicago this year, because the objective is much bigger and it's no longer in Seattle as a let's get together in a smaller group. It's a more traditional Ignite.
Yeah, but then there'll be the problem about travel expenses. Correct. Nobody will want the engineers. And then, of course, would you expose a Microsoft engineer to bologna lunches? I mean, the most famous Ignite lunch of all times. Ignite 2015, bologna sandwiches for everybody.
I'm trying to think if I was there. So that was the one in Chicago?
Yes.
Yeah, McCormick Place. Yeah.
Yes, I was there. So
yeah, day one.
I was there too, but I don't recall the lunch. That just didn't register, or maybe it was so bad that I totally blocked it.
I think your mind has been erased, but believe you me, there was a ton of bologna cut down into sandwiches that day and distributed to Ignite attendees. It made many of us have to go out and drink very heavily to forget.
I think that might have been one of those days where whenever the lunch was in a different location of the conference center, and then it took like 20 to 30 minutes walk from another location to the lunch. And I said, oh, time out. Okay, we'll go back. So
what was here's a question for you guys. What was the most famous innovation announced at Ignite 2015?
Most famous in 2015.
It's had a fundamental effect on Microsoft 365 ever since.
2016.
2015. May 15.
2015. Yes.
2015.
I'm thinking
So we-
instantly to Delve, but I don't think that was it, right? So
No,
search
Delve
came
was the first of the next generation knowledge management portals that Microsoft promised and failed to deliver. So that wasn't it.
Well, the first incarnation of that, like my mind, when you talk about knowledge management, I instantly need to think about, I think that was in 2008. There was a companion thing to Moz. There was like knowledge management pack.
There was.
Something. So that is my first experience with KM on Moz. But if that
2015 has to be Power Platform.
No.
Okay, it's pretty close.
Office 365 groups.
Ooh, okay. That's interesting fundamental piece of things, which, by the way, caused a lot of confusion. So,
Yes. Yeah, because at that stage, so Office 365 groups previewed in November 2014.
Yeah.
Were GA at Ignite in May 2015, and since then have become the great unmanageable of Microsoft 365.
Sure.
But they are a fundamental underpinning of everything we do. It's just sad that we've made such a mess of them.
Sure. And I think as they were introduced, there wasn't this one-to-one associations with everything immediately. And that was kind of, it took time for people to understand that when I create a team, there's going to be a group. When I create a SharePoint site, there's going to be a group. So it was really hard for people to understand that association, and it's taken a while. So.
Oh yeah, and also going back to these again, this unmet need that we had for years with emails, which groups are being used. And Tony, yes. I think you are one of the first, if not the first person who created this very elaborate script trying to, because like there was no one API to get, paper from. So you would use PowerShell remoting on Exchange combined with every 5 workloads into one script, and it would be a beast of a script. But that was probably, and I don't know if that's still the case, the only way really to get the truth of what's actually being used.
Yeah, that script is still there today, version 5.8, and it uses the graph now, so it's all good.
Okay, good. It evolved.
Modernized. All good. Yeah. And no, all the hacks were taken out. But the interesting thing, you mentioned Delve, and Delve is a thing that highlights documents that you never knew you had access to. But of course, one of the things that we're now facing, and with this, with Copilot for Microsoft 365, is that we're seeing that Copilot can illuminate all of the sins that people have in SharePoint and OneDrive. And the big difference here is that it's not just a case of showing people what they have. It's a case of consuming the stuff that people have, including all the inaccurate and out of date and totally wrong information that people have. And this, I think, is one of the great challenges that we face today. There's no doubt that AI is terrifically important, but the problem I think we have is that we're building AI, or we're trying to use AI functionality on top of a foundation which is very, very, very weak in some parts. I mean, if you're the type of person who cleans up your OneDrive once a week, okay, now everybody smiles and says, no, I don't do that.
Let's think about that imaginary person. Some say they exist.
Okay, so out of the 400 million Office 365 paid accounts, let's imagine that there are 3 people in the world that clean up their OneDrive once a week. These are the same people who also clean up their inbox once a week to delete all the bad messages. They also go through their team's chat and remove stuff. Very disciplined people. But the rest of us, all the other human beings, are quite happy to leave old junk where it is. Why? Microsoft makes all that storage available to us, so why shouldn't we leave it?
And search works. You can just briefly find everything. So.
Exactly. And search is wonderful. Search has improved so much over the years. Yes. And in fact, Copilot for Microsoft 365 is even better search because you can use natural language to find things.
Yeah.
but you find terrible stuff in there. And I'm not so much worried about the, Copilot finding sensitive information and reusing it, because that can be blocked with things like sensitivity labels, intelligent use of sensitivity labels, and all of that. I'm really concerned about two things. One is that we have all of this bad, outdated, obsolete information in SharePoint and OneDrive. And the second thing is this tendency for human beings to accept what a computer generates. And I know that there are all of these warning labels saying, don't trust what AI generates, check what AI generates, be very careful what AI generates. But human beings have got this tendency, and it's been bred into us for the last 40 years. You go to a bank, ask for a mortgage.
It's
computer says no. Okay, go home. Computer says yes. Great, I've got a mortgage. I go buy a house. And now we're into this thing of AI. AI says this. Oh, that's great. I'll use that. I think
it's still based on facts, right? But then facts which might be outdated, and that's potentially the challenge.
Or wrong. I mean, some of the stuff I wrote, I have every article I ever wrote in SharePoint for the last 10 years or thereabouts. And I'm sure, in fact, I'm absolutely positive there's stuff there that I wrote maybe 8 years ago when I was in one of my speculative moods and I was thinking about the way things were going to happen. Yeah, I got things wrong. Absolutely. There's stuff out on the internet that, under my name where I've got stuff wrong. I know that. Yep. But that's life. We evolve over time. We learn. We deepen our thinking. We understand things better. We understand what happens when software gets out there in the real world and people put pressure on it, and we find all the crack lines and whatever, and we fill those and whatever. So we learn over time. But because of this legacy of document debris that we have accrued over the last 10 or 15 or whatever years, I just think organizations are going to, they've got a task ahead of them to be able to use this AI really as intelligently as we imagine that we can.
And that's obviously where the governance and the new services from Microsoft are coming in, where the ISVs are doing a lot of great stuff as well, making sure that the information is correct, but still a valid concern, 100%.
But none of these services can really go down deep into the bowels of SharePoint and find these lurking documents, unless you go and do an audit of every document that has been put onto every SharePoint site.
Probably not do.
Good luck with
that.
You will be the fourth out of the 3 persons who do that.
I think the classic quote, I think it was Kimmo Forss, who's one of my really old colleagues from Microsoft Finland, nowadays working in Azure engineering, but he said as he was working in migration space at some point many months ago, that on average, how many times people access the document when they put it in cloud? Guess the number. How many times the document is being opened or accessed or touched?
I'm not sure. I'll hazard guess of saying that any document that's more than 6 months old never gets accessed.
Exactly. It's most the average is like 1.2 times, and the one being the first time when it's being put there, and that's it, and left there. And that's actually, I think that's the fundamental challenge what we'll have, definitely, the amount of content to maintain and update. Completely different reference point, but I'm saying this also because I own some of the, the Learn documentation, the docs.microsoft.com, learn.microsoft.com. At some point we generated, actually Waldek was the one who helped us on generating a lot of guidance and everything else. The more guidance is good. However, the more guidance means maintenance cost, and then it means challenges of keeping the material up to date. So actually less or suitable amount of guidance is the best. So you don't run out of, same with documents, rather than having, it's an interesting challenge.
About docs is that, especially on Microsoft 365, right? Like we have the thing called the Microsoft Graph. And on one hand, that is the API, but it's backed really by a graph of relationships between all the different nodes. So people, documents, emails, and so forth, and so forth. So as we create activities, as we open file, edit them, and share, we create activities, we build out this graph. Yes. One might think that it will be a brilliant way to use this graph to benefit from it, to find what's not being used and archive it, put it in cold storage, whatever, that if need be, you can get to it, but it's not your prime resource for anything for day-to-day work.
Yeah, I mean, everything is there. All the tooling is there. You could do it. I've written grand PowerShell scripts, for example. Bring this back to PowerShell. I've written grand PowerShell scripts that use graph APIs to list every document in a document library because I wanted to find out exactly what was there. And that was a really interesting exercise, actually, because when you see it in a report, you can actually think about it. I find it easier to do that than to actually look at stuff on the screen, because the screen keeps on scrolling past, and you miss stuff. But most of us actually don't create reports anymore. We don't like printing. We want everything on a blooming mobile phone. Do you think you're going to go and do a review of your SharePoint document library on a mobile phone? Probably not. Probably not. So it is a big challenge. I think the only way we're probably going to get by it is probably a little bit more aggressive use of retention policies to clean things out. Yep. That's one way. Yep. I think I'm not sure about restricted SharePoint search. I think that's just a sticking plaster to help some organizations get on. I think 100 sites is ridiculous in terms of it's far too limited a list. But there are it's going to need people to actually think about information, how information is stored and managed in a Microsoft 365 tenant in an era where human frailty, and that's what oversharing is, it's a human error, human frailty can potentially reveal confidential information. But you know what? Human frailty reveals confidential information even in the physical world. If somebody, for example, mislabels a file or puts a file into the wrong box that's taken off to somewhere like I don't know, where it's eventually discovered. So we live in interesting times. Well, we could say that every year.
Yeah, that's true.
Because we get new challenges every year.
You mentioned there an idea like would you ever do an audit of your files on a mobile phone? Now imagine if we could make it more interesting. Swipe left to keep, swipe right to remove.
Oh, what? The Tinder? Are we talking here about SharePoint Tinder?
I guess.
You can coin the name if you want to.
Oh, I love you, my document. Oh, I don't love you, that document.
That is a keeper.
And of course,
I really got pleasure out of that document. No, I don't think so.
It sparks joy. It clearly sparks joy.
And like you said, Tony, the retention labeling, retention cleaning automation, all of that is great. Sidetrack for 20 seconds. I remember back in Ignite, which year, whatever, we introduced retention labels. There was some massive chaos because all of the demo tenants started cleaning up demos, and then we realized that crap, it was the retention labels which are now enabled because stuff started deleting. But it's retention labels, and obviously there's other ways of handling that. And of course, we as a Microsoft and need to really think through how do we improve the relevance ranking based on the modified dates and all of that stuff. But again, that's a simple thing to say. But then there's system processes accessing files. Will that impact the relevance in the same way as human processes in accessing the files? And there's a lot of variables to measure. So
this is a very very complicated area, and but it's one that I think that people need to, if they're going to use Copilot for Microsoft 365, I think this is an area that organizations really need to do a deep dive, and they need to put real resources into people resources, because it's people eventually who are going to be able to resolve and tell you whether a document is important or not. That's just the way things work.
Yeah. Cool. Mm-hmm. From a timing perspective, being conscious about the time, typically we close the podcast on kind of recapping what's happening this week or next week, and obviously not anything confidential because there might be some other people watching the show at some point. But how does, Tony, your day-to-day work look like within upcoming week? Ireland is celebrating Easter, I guess, or is it?
Yeah. Right now, I guess we're preparing for the Easter break.
Yep.
So after that, I think what's in April? Oh, the M365 conference. Yes, another opportunity to go back to Mickeyville and talk there. So I'm looking forward to doing that. I will be talking about using the Microsoft 365 graph, the Microsoft Graph PowerShell SDK at that conference, and I'll also be talking about using Copilot intelligently with some of the issues that we've talked about here. So I'm looking forward to that. Not looking forward to the travel. It's a thing that as you get older, that the prospect of pouring your body into an airplane gets less and less attractive.
Yeah, it is fun to be places, to see folks, but the whole thing in between.
Yes, it's pain in the arse.
Yeah.
Pain in the arse.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I'm looking forward to. I like big conferences. I like meeting people. I like the opportunity to, as the politicians say, press the flesh. Just find out what's happening. Find out what people are really thinking about. Stuff that they'll tell you face to face that they will not tell you in an email or something else. So that's especially my Microsoft contacts. They tell me stuff face to face that they absolutely will not put down in email. So
there is a reason for it, probably. So.
Yeah, they're just slightly, and I appreciate that. Yeah. And that's the thing I've actually missed over the years with the lack of good big face-to-face conferences.
Yeah.
So that'll be good fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward. I'll be there as well. So that's really cool. Are you in the European Collaboration Summit, by the way? Just
no
checking.
Okay, no, so this is another thing. I think if I would be critical about some of my fellow MVPs, I think that there are too many of them who become conference professionals. They're at every conference. They talk about the same thing at every conference, and and they imagine that this is a good thing. They imagine that this is a good thing because they're sharing their knowledge, natty. I'm thinking to myself, you'd be so much better off if you limited the conference sessions that you go to and you concentrate in accumulating knowledge that you can share at those conference sessions. So that's my personal attitude. I do very few conferences. I select the conferences I want to go to. So I'll go to this one. I will go to the Experts Conference in Dallas in October. And I will go to the European SharePoint Conference, which this year is in Stockholm.
Correct.
Stockholm.
Yes.
So, and that's it. Basically 3 a year. And so I'm definitely not one of those people you will see at every conference.
Yeah. And that
besides
travel as
well. Apart from travel, also conference food is terrible. We talked about bologna sandwiches at night. So why would I go to conferences every week or every month or every 2 weeks or whatever and have my digestive system perpetually assaulted by terrible conference food? Not going to happen.
Yeah, true. Now, quick recap, Waldek, what's on your table? We just did this on Monday, now it's Wednesday.
Yeah, exactly. So it's still the same week, still the same plans. Tomorrow, Thursday, which happened as you're watching this episode, which is aired on a Tuesday the week after, we release new version of Dev Proxy, so that is out. We're running also a focus group around an experiment that we're running, trying to understand how viable of an option it would be to let people do Microsoft 365 learn modules without a dev tenant. So like in more an offline scenario, or basically to even easy onboarding, right? So you don't need to get a tenant first to go through Learn. So we're experimenting around that to learn from few folks. We had a release of CLI for Microsoft 365. What's coming weeks after? We releasing more things on Learn around extending Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365. So stay tuned for more news on that. Vesa, what about you?
Quick recap, SPFX 1.19 beta coming out today from the developer side of the world, and I still need to do some videos on that one right after this recording, but that's the story of my life. And then we're gonna release actually Viva Connection bot stuff tomorrow, so a lot of stuff and announcements coming out. So, and then the same thing with Tony, we're starting to get prepared for Orlando, starting to push us on Microsoft side especially, because everything has to be ready early on, and it's like, no, it's going to be ready by the eve of the presentation every single time, regardless. But it's just the story of the coordination as well. But cool. I guess that's it for now. Thank you, Tony, for joining. Really cool to catch up.
Can I ask you, Vesa, can I ask you to do one thing, to use your influence
Absolutely.
in one area?
Absolutely. Do I have an influence?
Okay. So maybe I am flogging a dead horse here.
Sure.
Okay. Not that I would ever want to compare you to a dead horse, but there's
good
one
way of asking help. Right.
Yeah, well, there you go. Hey, you're Finnish. I don't know. Maybe dead horse is a delicacy in Finland. I don't know.
They'll say, made first. So.
Okay. So there's been this. There's this terribly irritating SharePoint problem out there.
Sure.
And that is the usage reports returned by the graph for SharePoint don't include the site URL. Now, this is a problem that was introduced in September. It's an acknowledged problem. There are people apparently working on it, but I'm losing the will to live waiting for this bug to be fixed. I mean, 6 months to bring back site URLs. It's a kind of a fundamental.
That is fundamental.
It's a fundamental thing to be able to use a usage report, is to be able to identify the site that's being used.
Yeah.
6 months, guys? Is this a really hard computer problem?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good. I'll take a note on that. Let's see if we can figure out who's owning that inside of the organization. It is.
I know. I have a name.
Oh, let's not to get that one recorded, but you can actually let's have a chat offline. So
I'll send you the details.
Sounds good. Let's see if I can help there. No promises, but again, I'll try my best. So
I always like to end a podcast with some challenge, and now I've done it again. It's great.
Call to action, right?
That is call to action.
But he's going to be a hero. If I now solve this problem, that will give us
a hero.
The rest of the MVPs that they should test.
But only after 6 months.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. That is fair.
SharePoint problems still outstanding after 6 months are my specialty.
There we go. Yeah. Sounds good.
It's like very much niche.
Very niche. All right. Anyway, sorry about that.
Tony.
No, all
Thank
good.
you so much.
Thank you, Tony. Well, it's good to catch up and good to hear some of the historical things as well. And I like the way before we started recording, you were really plant related on, at this stage of a thing, you don't, need to be as polite as a VC or VP within a certain companies, but I completely understand that. And to be honest, with all the honesty, we at the Microsoft, we also appreciate to hear the things bluntly as well, because there's quite unfortunate, there's multiple ways of providing feedback, and it's a cultural thing and a regional thing as well. But at least I do appreciate a lot on people being bluntly honest and transparent and frank, because otherwise not necessarily people understand the importance or the importance of the issue or topic. So
if we're not clear and honest about where problems lie, those problems will stay there forever, just like this SharePoint problem has for the last 6 months.
Exactly.
Well, in this case, we are very clear. It's still there. There's call to action.
Yes.
Go Vesa.
Go for it.
Yes, we'll catch up on that within the show as well. But thank you, Tony, for joining. We'll close up for the show together with Waldek right after the interview. Thank you for this one.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Tony, one more time on joining. Really cool to catch up and have a bit more insights on your history as well, because I with all the honesty, I didn't understood that you've been so closely involved in and having lunches with Bill Gates and all that stuff within few months back, but still really cool to get some historical perspectives on things, and also talking about the Copilot and the future things and the challenges what we have right now. So really cool. Now, like defined or mentioned already in the intro, we will not go through articles this time because we're recording super close to the previous episode, but we'll come back on the community videos, articles, Microsoft news within the next episode. But I guess that's it. Waldek, have a nice Eastern holiday, as we're coming back. This show is just coming live and has been released after Eastern holiday, and it's April, spring.
It is already like 1/3 of the year is 1/4 of the year is already gone. We're already in April, and it's not a joke.
Yes, and it's not a one.
Not a joke.
April yeah, 1, but this is but that okay. Yeah. Fair point. Anyway, so. You're so funny.
I'm too fast. Yes.
Cool. Anyway, please use PnP hashtag PnP Weekly in Twitter or in LinkedIn, so we know what's getting out. We're obviously trying to catch up on all of the things, but there's so much stuff getting written across Microsoft 365 Power Platform related technologies, and that is really hard to stay up to date. But we're trying to use that hashtag to help us on catching up on things, and then call out all of the cool videos and what other assets which are available. I guess that's it. We'll be back within a week. Have a great rest of the week, and hopefully enjoy the show. Whatever.
Echo.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
Cheers. Bye-bye.